Welcome in, guys. Tips for Gamers here. I'm Dodds, and we got Tug with us here going over our top 5 college power rankings as it sits right now. We're going to be updating this each week. We don't have Coach with us, but he will be trying to join us in a future episode to go over his top 5 power rankings as well. And so we're going to go over our top 5 power rankings, talk about these teams, where they sit, teams that we believe moving forward have a good chance of making it to the playoffs and doing something in the playoffs. So we're going to go over my top 5 rankings first, and then we'll go over Tug's top 5 rankings, and then go over why we ranked them, where we ranked them, and what they have moving forward. So at number 1, I don't think this is a shock to any of you guys, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. Talented team, very, very talented team. At number 2, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. At number 3, I have the Cincinnati Bearcats. At number 4, I have Alabama Crimson Tide. Number 5, this may shock some of you guys, I have Michigan. And then I did do a 6 and a 7 here just because I was having some conflicts. And I have at number 6, I have Florida. And then at number 7, I have Oklahoma. Now, just added those two on. But, yeah, that's my top 5 ranking. I guess top 7 ranking.
Okay, and at my top 5, I'm going to do number 1 is Georgia. Number 2 is Ohio State. Number 3 is Oklahoma. Number 4 is Alabama. And number 5 is Michigan.
All right, so now for just a reference here, we're going to go over ESPN's computer releases, its new top 25 rankings. So this was produced on October 24th at 8:05 a.m., so yesterday for us. And what we see here is we see Georgia at number 1, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Ohio State, 4, Michigan, Oklahoma's at 5, and then we'll just keep going down the list. Pittsburgh 6th, Florida at 7th, Iowa State at 8th, Cincinnati at number 9. All right, so for number 1, I think it's pretty simple. Georgia, number 1 ranked defense. Offense is ranked 42nd. And, you know, their offense has a little issues here coming up. You don't really know who's going to be their starting quarterback. They're having some quarterback issues with that. But their defense is really the key here. I mean, they went several straight games where they just dominated and just crushed teams. Now those teams,
no scores.
Yeah, no scores at all, and they were just crushing them. But we can have that debate on who they played on some of these teams and kind of talk about it. But as it sits right now, Georgia is clear number 1 for me.
Absolutely, yeah, clear number 1 for me too. The games I'm looking out for Georgia, I mean, they don't really have a tough schedule ahead of them, but games I'm looking out for them is Florida, because Florida they almost beat Alabama. Now, granted, Alabama's not having a great year, but we'll see how they do against Florida.
Well,
this weekend.
Florida's ranked 9th in offense, and Florida's ranked 38th, in defense. So,
which is better than their offense, Georgia's offense, because their offense is ranked 42nd. So
yeah, and you know, they did what they did against Bama. Florida is that team, and that's why I had them in basically my top 7, because Florida is just a tough football program. I mean, it is a tough team. They're not getting as much on recruits as the other big boys are, but you know, they're a tough program. They come to compete. Now, moving on to Ohio State here, Ohio State is ranked number 2. The reason I can't put them at number 1 or even have that discussion of them being at number 1 is the fact that you lost. Okay, you lost, Buttercup. You couldn't. What are you gonna do when you lose? Well, guess what? You could have the best offense in the league. You can have a decent defense getting better now, but you lost. And Kerry Combs was in charge of that defense, and you saw it even in the Alabama game for the BCS championship, for the college championship game, and they got smoked. I mean, you had Borland going man coverage with Devonta Smith. Okay, Kerry Combs clearly needed to be changed out of that. They put in Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes is their new play caller at defense, is a young guy. I believe he was a special teams coach. So the thing about Ohio State, you know their offense, right? You know what you got there. There is some questions on Ohio State's offense moving forward of, can Stroud play the big game? Stroud at first was painful to watch. He was the 4-star out of the 5 stars, and they
Yeah,
started.
it was bad.
It was bad. It was like, oh, he's overthrown him. The Oregon game, he threw a pick at the very end, and Ohio State could have ran down. And and really good programs are going to win that at the very end, even if it's sloppy. He made a mistake. He's young. He didn't play for 2 years.
Yeah, which is amazing. He doesn't play for 2 years. He comes in. This is his first year. I mean, you could tell in the beginning that he just completely looked scared, very nervous. He talked about the bugs. He was nervous, but now he finally looks like he's coming into play.
He looks like a Heisman candidate.
Exactly, he looks like a Heisman candidate. But Ohio State has a very tough schedule coming up with Penn State. So let's see how he does.
Well, Ohio State, just so people know out there, the Big Ten was the highest ranked conference out of any of the conferences this year. Simple as that. There's 3 teams right now of the Big Ten that are in the top 10. So, they have an extremely tough schedule. I mean, you got to go play at Michigan for your last game. You got to go play at Michigan. Iowa's pissed off for one. Iowa just got, thrashed in the rankings after being number 2, and then they have, they have a good shot of being into the championship game. If they continue and they end up dominating. But they lost against Purdue, which Purdue is just that team that they're that
upset team.
Yeah, they could come in and they beat Ohio State not even that long ago. But they're that upset team. And, Iowa's going to be pissed off. Iowa's always told they're not that good and blah, blah, blah. And so Iowa's going to try to come and they would love nothing more than to knock them off if they get a chance at the championship. But you got Michigan and Michigan State who, they're tough programs and they can beat a lot of good teams out there. So the big question I have for Stroud is if Stroud goes against Alabama, because I think that's the best matchup here right now. Or not Alabama, but Georgia. I think the best matchup is Georgia, Ohio State. If those two, because Ohio State is number 1 in offense, 48th in defense, and their defense is only getting better each week. It's obvious Matt Barnes is changing it. There's no question about the player's skill level. The Ohio State recruits better than almost any school out there, and they have 5-star DNs. They have great linebackers. They got 5-star cornerbacks. They got, Proctor went down with an injury this year. But my question with Stroud, I want to see more out of Stroud. I think Michigan State and Michigan, how he plays against them, can he win the big one? You have all the talent around you, son. You're a Heisman candidate right now. You're talking to the Heisman candidate. You are a talented football player. There's no question. And Ryan Day saw something in you, and we're all seeing it now because I didn't see it at first. But can you play the big one, and can you utilize that insane offense that you have, number 1 ranked offensive line and number 1 ranked wide receiving crew? Can you utilize them, and can you...
Don't forget about the running back, Henderson.
Oh, God, Henderson is just an absolute freak. That kid is the best recruit that has come in Ohio State football at halfback, which is saying something. When you got Ezekiel Elliott, who just came through there, Eddie George, you got some big-name guys who come through there. Now, moving on to Cincinnati here. Cincinnati got the number 3, and for me, Cincinnati, not even for me. Let's go over the rankings. They're ranked 54th in offense. Okay, as simple as that. 54th in offense, and they're ranked on defense. They're ranked 10th. Okay, and I got them at number 3. You don't have them at number 3.
They're not even in my top 5.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that they are the team, and Cincinnati fans, I know you're out there and you're probably screaming at the top of your lungs right now at that, but, here's the thing about it. The strength of schedule just means so much more than undefeated. You can't. Bryce wrote a great article on our website and talking about that is you cannot use the undefeated argument because Michigan's undefeated. Okay, there are several teams out there that are undefeated. SMU right now is undefeated in their conference here, but when you scream undefeated, you can't use that as your weapon in because you beat Notre Dame. Okay. Fantastic. Good win against Notre Dame here. The score was 24-13 against Notre Dame. Notre Dame really didn't handle USC, and USC is just not showing that USC is the typical USC that we've seen in previous years. So beating USC, or Notre Dame beating USC is really just not that amazing. it's just not to be expected. But Notre Dame, and basically the other big, huge win that they had here was against Indiana, which Indiana in the Big Ten is not even close to a competitive school in the Big Ten. So in reality, I understand your argument that Cincinnati, they really haven't played anyone tough. Miami of Ohio, Murray State, Temple, UCF, Navy, almost lost to Navy, 1-5 Navy. Yeah, it's tough. I get that. So I see moving forward, I do see that Cincinnati, for them to stay in playoff contention, what Cincinnati's going to have to do is have a form of luck. Ohio State needs to lose, because if Ohio State wins out, there's no way they're going to put Cincinnati above Ohio State with what they're doing.
Absolutely not. No.
Not a shot. And good luck ever being above Bama. That's just not going to happen. The SEC, the college football rankings, they're never going to be like, oh, yeah, let's put, if it's between Bama, Cincinnati, or Ohio State and Cincinnati loses both those if both those teams win out. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, Cincinnati for me. And you're number 3. Who do you have? You have Oklahoma?
I have Oklahoma just because of their offense. Now, they have a horribly ranked defense at 68th, but their offense is ranked 17th, which is pretty good. And I've seen some of their games, and they do have a high-powered offense. They can score. They can have amazing comebacks like they did versus Texas. And they almost lost that game. It didn't look pretty, but they pulled it off. They pulled off a win and got massive points. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, in college, offense is the strongest link out of both offense and defense. So that's the only reason why I put Oklahoma at number 3. And personally, I think that Oklahoma could beat Cincinnati at the end of it.
That's a tough. You know what? That's a great question. Is like, who do you have winning that game? Do you have Cincinnati beating Oklahoma? I think they could. If they struggled, Oklahoma struggled against Kansas, 1-5 Kansas, and with their defense being ranked 68th, you saw it. I mean, point blank and simple, Kansas threw all over them. I mean, it was a throwing nightmare for them, and they couldn't stop it.
And not only that, they had to put in Williams. So they benched their first stringer.
Yep.
And then they put in Rattler. And then they put in Williams, and Williams looked better. He performed better that game. So there's still a lot of questions around Oklahoma and their quarterback. How does Williams perform from here on out? I don't know, obviously.
Caleb Williams is obviously a very talented football player. That whole shenanigans of you grabbing that ball, I think the play should have been called dead against Kansas.
I don't know who doesn't think that besides Oklahoma fans. But
of course, yeah.
Forward progress was obviously stopped.
However, what you did there, Caleb Williams, with grabbing that ball and moving that ball, dude, Jesus. Hey, I don't care what the rules say or any of that. And at this point in time, obviously, I don't think you should have won that game at that. But still, that was impressive nonetheless.
It shows leadership and improvising.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Football smarts. I mean,
Jesus, and athleticism beyond anything.
Hunger.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, he was just like, I'm not going to lose this. And they were talking in the game like Rattler should have been starting. And Rattler in the very beginning of the year, they said he was the number 1 quarterback. I didn't see it personally, but that's what they said. And I want to go through a matchup real quick, and because we did a poll, guys, with you about who would win, or that if you guys believe that Cincinnati was a true playoff team. And I really think the big thing here is that we asked them, are they a true college playoff team? 54% of you guys said yes. 46% of you guys said no. Now, we also asked you guys, as it would sit right now, would you put Cincinnati in the playoffs over Ohio State? 60% of you said yes. 40% said no. Now, I think that this is an interesting argument here because both teams just played the same team. Okay, they played Indiana this year. Okay, and against Cincinnati, and they both played at Indiana. Indiana had 376 total yards. They actually had more than Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati ended up winning 38-24, which is, it was a handed. I think that was a good win.
For sure, yeah.
I think they beat them, and there's no question about it. And you look at it, okay, so 376 yards that they got on Cincinnati total. Now, if we go to the Ohio State game versus them, Indiana got 128 yards total. That means they got less yards against Ohio State's defense than they rushed for against Cincinnati. And they rushed, so I'll put it to you this way, they rushed for 152 yards on Cincinnati. So in the total yards, they didn't even come close. Like it just wasn't even close. Ohio State was purely dominant. So, I know that was the poll and that's how it came out, but I don't see that as anywhere close to, Cincinnati's just not beating Ohio State if those two compete. If you saw those two going after each other, or you had to guess at who would win out of that, I think you would choose Ohio State. I think anyone would at that point. Yeah, and then moving on to our number 4 here. I have Bama.
I have Bama as well.
Yeah, Bama is ranked 10th in offense, and they're ranked 15th in defense. One can argue that they're the most balanced team, even though when you watch them almost losing a game against Tennessee, Texas A&M, there's
Florida.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues Bama has there with and maybe it isn't your team, maybe it's your play calling, whatever it is, but Alabama's getting scored on by less than amazing teams.
This is definitely not the same Alabama that we have seen in the past. This year's been weird for NCAA football, period.
Easily.
For the FBS, and it's just the rankings are weird. No team is really impressive so far.
Yeah, and I think here's the biggest thing. Who are your 3 most impressive teams? And I think yours is probably the same as mine. Is Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Bama.
Yeah, mine's the same.
Clear teams that you're looking at them going, okay, the 3 nastiest teams are those 3 teams. Like, even though Bama's struggling against Tennessee until the fourth quarter, and, they lost to Texas A&M, almost lost to Florida, you don't want to play Bama if you're one of these other schools. You don't. You'd rather play Cincinnati. You'd rather play Oklahoma. If you were to ask a Georgia fan, like, hey, would you rather play Cincinnati, Oklahoma, or Ohio State or Bama? They're not choosing Ohio State and Bama as one of their first teams, not even close. So those 3 are dominant. I think it really drops off after that. It just you just go, who's really that talented. And I have Michigan as my number 5. Michigan's 35th in offense, and they're 11th in defense. Their wins are sure in the hell they're not pretty. There's no question about it. Michigan struggled. Michigan is just really not. They're just not that dominant against some of these teams here. You beat Washington. You beat Northern Illinois. You beat Northern Illinois 63-10. Okay. Congratulations. Rutgers you beat, which you just saw what Ohio State did to Rutgers, which was just horrible. They almost lost to Nebraska. That one really, where I saw that, as I was like, okay, that's kind of where you're struggling there. And then Northwestern.
They handed it to Northwestern
easily.
Pretty much dominated the entire time. And Ohio State goes into Lincoln, Nebraska to play Nebraska. So let's see how that turns out. Is Nebraska really that tough of a team?
I think Nebraska's looking good this year. I think Nebraska, it's a tough team, and I think Ohio State is going to. They're either going to show up and it's going to be a tough game, or I think it's going to be a blowout, and Ohio State's just going to run away with it. That's kind of how I see it. I don't see Michigan coming in and just bullying Ohio State. I don't see it, even though it's at their home field. I just don't see it. But going over some of these guys, who does Georgia have coming up next? And you mentioned it previously. Florida, they have Kentucky was good, okay, but Kentucky wasn't great. Kentucky on offense, they were ranked 76. Okay, their defense was ranked 23rd. That's comparable to Michigan State. Michigan State was ranked 26th in offense right now, and their defense is 84th. So pretty close those two teams are. of, and one can talk about who they played. The Big Ten has had a very tough schedule. The two big conferences, obviously, SEC, Big Ten. So you could kind of supplement that game in with Michigan State and get an idea about, how truly talented Georgia is. Florida, that's going to be one to watch. I think that's going to be a measuring stick to see, okay, how good is Georgia? Are you going to come in and bully this Florida team because they're playing at Florida?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a game that's going to be very interesting. It could be very close, or Georgia at the end, fourth quarter, they pull it through, they score, a few touchdowns. But I think overall it's going to be a very tight game.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I don't care what the score is, I care when you scored and how it looked. Looking at Tennessee, if you look at the Tennessee-Alabama score, that didn't. If you looked at it and didn't watch the game, you'd say, well, Bama beat them, but they allowed a lot of touchdowns. What the heck? But if you watched it, Bama didn't truly dominate the game until the very end. I mean, they just didn't dominate Tennessee. Now, Tennessee's had a decent year, not great, but if they come in and handle Florida at Florida, I'm going to be impressed. As simple as that.
So am I.
I will give them even more credit than what I've already given them. Then they play Missouri. I don't think that's going to be hard. I think that's a cakewalk. You got Tennessee. If you're really that good, you're going to walk through Tennessee. They're playing at Tennessee. They're going to just beat Tennessee. And then they play Charleston, so CSU. Come on. I mean, that's an easy – they should walk through there and just dominate them. And then they play at Georgia Tech. So I don't think anything there is really, their schedule for the most part is pretty easy after Florida. Tennessee will maybe give them a little hiccup, but I don't see much more than that. I think. And then moving on to Ohio State here, they got Penn State at the shoe. A lot of big recruits are coming for that, a lot of five-star recruits. So watch out for the big five-star recruits coming out. That if that game goes well for Ohio State, you may see them jump up. They're ranked 4th right now in recruiting. You may see them jump up in the recruiting and maybe even surpass Alabama at this point in time. Georgia's ranked number 1, Alabama number 2, and Ohio State 3, and then Penn State at number 4. So this is big for Penn State in recruiting too, because if you guys lose on this, your recruiting could get hurt. But I project that Ohio State obviously beats Penn State here. And then they got to go play at Lincoln, Nebraska against it's Ann Arbor, Michigan too. I think, or what did you say? Anyways, aside from that, I'm getting discombobulated here. But we got Nebraska coming up after that. What do you think they're going to do to Nebraska? You think they're going to beat them pretty handily?
They should.
Yeah.
They should beat them pretty handily. I mean, it should be like another Rutgers or Tulsa. It should be close to that.
Now,
I don't see them scoring Nebraska. I don't see Nebraska scoring much more than 14 points.
Me neither. I don't either. But if Nebraska does do well, does that mean Michigan's actually better than what we think?
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, you can definitely make that argument. You
can. I think you definitely can. Now and then they got Purdue. Then their last 2 games are going to be the toughest, which is that's a good way to end the season. But you got Michigan State, and then you have Michigan. So I think that's going to be.
And what's good about Michigan State is it's in the shoe. So, home field advantage that should be a lot better for Ohio State.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Now, Cincinnati here. Moving on to Cincinnati. Cincinnati has Tulane at Tulane. They should handle them. And if they're really serious, they should just blow them apart. They really should. I don't think there should be an issue there if they're truly as good as they are. But here's an interesting one. Then after that, Tulsa has to come to Cincinnati. Now, they get the home field advantage there, but Tulsa did well against Ohio State, and they did well against Oklahoma. Does Tulsa maybe take it, hit them in the face a little bit there? That'd be interesting to see. And then aside from that, they got South Florida, UCF. And then the big one, I think the biggest matchup, obviously, is the undefeated SMU, who SMU's team is actually ranked pretty high on offense. Their defense is not ranked very good, but their offense is ranked pretty stout. So that one I think is going to be the most interesting there. And then they have East Carolina, so that should be a walk-off. And then I know for your number 3, you have Oklahoma. Oklahoma, dang, they just allowed so many points against them. They got Texas Tech coming up. That's going to be interesting. And then they have Baylor, who's ranked 16th right now.
That'll be an interesting matchup. So the 3 that I'm looking out for on Oklahoma is the Baylor game, the Iowa State, and the Oklahoma State. Yep. I personally think that they could have 2 losses at the end end of all this.
Of course, if you almost lose to Kansas towards the end of the game and you come away with it at the end of the game, Kansas is 1-5 and they scored 23 points on Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, by the way it's been going.
And they're playing in Baylor. They're playing in Oklahoma State. So they're not going to have – those are road games that are going to be very tough. And not to mention their QB situation with Williams. He's brand new. He's a freshman.
Yeah, and you know what? He looked good and stuff, but can you continue it? And he's not also looking good all game long.
Yeah.
You're seeing these, moments in time. So, this is pretty interesting. I think Oklahoma probably has the toughest schedule for them. I think Ohio State, obviously, they have a very tough schedule, but Ohio State's such a high-octane offense that in reality they should run through some of these schools. They're very tough schools. It's like playing Kentucky with Michigan State. Michigan's tougher than, on paper, they're tougher than Kentucky and Michigan State. So obviously those are tough, but with Oklahoma being where they're at and the struggles that they've had, this is not a cakewalk schedule at the end. I mean,
no,
Baylor,
not at all.
No, not at all. So, and then moving on for me with Michigan here, who Michigan has coming up. We already know Michigan has Michigan State this week. Tough one. That's going to be interesting. I could see either one of those teams winning. Honestly, those are not easy teams, and they have to go play at Michigan State. So, tough one there. Then Indiana comes and plays Michigan, and then you have Michigan heading to Penn State. So, that's tough. And then at the very end, you got to play freaking Ohio State, whether they're coming to playing you or you're going and playing them. Michigan does not have an easy schedule left. They just don't.
No, not at all. I mean, especially against Penn State. I mean, let's see how they do against that too. So
yeah. So and then we didn't go over Alabama, but I'd like to touch up on Alabama. I think Alabama. And the real reason here is Alabama almost has a cakewalk walking through here. You got LSU. Just has not shown that LSU is the typical LSU that we've seen previously. When they had Joe Burrow. And then, Jamar Chase. And then you got New Mexico State, and they have to come play at Alabama, so I don't see that one being tough. And then you got Arkansas, who has to come play at Alabama. Good luck. And then Alabama, the biggest one left is they got to go play Auburn at Auburn. And Auburn's ranked right now. So that one's probably going to be the most interesting. I'm curious to see how they do against LSU and Arkansas, just more as just curiosity. But the big one, I think, how well do you do against Auburn? That's really it. All right, and that's it for us, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. A little bit longer than what we were game planning for, but we wanted to go over our power rankings here. We're going to touch base on this next week as well and just kind of talk more college football. College football is getting interesting right this moment. It is getting really interesting, and I think this is going to be one of the craziest playoffs that we've ever seen. It has the potential of being one of the, if not the craziest playoffs that we've ever seen.
It's going to be intense. It's intense right now. The NCAA, just this whole year has been weird. So let's see how it unfolds. There's 4 weeks left. So we'll see how, or there's 5 weeks left. Let's see how it unfolds, and we'll go from there. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, any one of these guys, you could have Michigan end up wiping the floor, Michigan State beating Ohio State, and then you're talking Michigan's going into the playoffs, substituting out Ohio State. And then, I mean, there's so many things that happen. Cincinnati could lose, or they could keep dominating. You got Oklahoma who could lose or keep dominating in and out. So you got several teams that could be influxing, and changing this whole playoff dynamic. So, well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave us a comment down below. Let us know who your favorite college team is, guys. And hopefully we'll talk about them at some point in time, break them down. I appreciate having you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.